G'day there folks, it's Connor here again from Marquee Industries and we are back with some more stories from Reddit. Hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Anyway, hit like and subscribe and all that stuff, and let's get straight to the stories. Okie dokie, this one was posted on Am I the Jerk? It was written by user SockMonkey22 and it's titled, Am I the jerk for cutting my sister-in-law out of my life even if it upsets the family norms? Throwaway account. The cast. Myself, 25, and my husband, Tom, 27, his brother, Fern, 30, his sister, Margaret, 40, and her husband, Corey, 37, their dad and their stepmom. This is going to be super long, so I apologize in advance, but there really is so much to get through. I married into the family about a year ago. They're all a pretty tight-knit bunch, but have been exceedingly welcoming and accepting towards me. It took a while for me to warm up because I'm always hesitant around new people, but I actually have a lot of fun with them, and they've gone out of their way to make me feel like part of the family. I discovered early on that my husband's family has a unique way of handling conflict, and it's in sharp contrast to the way my own family handles disagreements. My family confronts issues head-on, sometimes ending in screaming matches if it gets heated enough, and all of us tend to speak up when something is bothering us or is fundamentally hurtful to someone. Tom's family is the opposite. They rarely address anything in real time, if at all. They typically whisper about it behind each other's backs, and usually just sit in tension for extended periods of time. It's been made clear to me that the only person in his family that is directly allowed to address an issue is their dad. Everyone else follows suit. This means if he isn't saying anything, no one else does. Period. The issue in all of this? My husband's sister, Margaret. I'll give you a little bit of background. She has 4 kids with her husband Corey, and they have a really odd dynamic between the two of them. Margaret is the more domineering of the two, often speaking for the both of them, while Corey just sort of sits there and nods along. Margaret is really prone to emotional outbursts over things that simply do not make sense. There are so many instances of the chaos that Margaret has caused within the family that it would take an eternity to describe them all. I do have some notable ones though. Repeatedly guilting people if they don't immediately drop everything to watch her 4 kids, screaming at the top of her lungs and causing a huge scene when there was tomatoes on her salad during a birthday party, regular complaining that no one helps her with anything. Her apartment, car, and kids have been almost exclusively funded by the rest of the family without any expectation of being paid back, and trash-talking her entire family publicly on social media on a regular basis. Not once has anyone ever addressed these things with her, and it's continued to escalate over time. The biggest issue right now is the rift between Margaret and the stepmom, and how that is affecting the entire family, myself included. Stepmom married into the family about 4 years ago, and is one of the kindest people I've ever met, point blank, period. Margaret publicly shames her at every family function, and seems to specifically reach for the cruelest things you could say or do to someone. Margaret regularly asks stepmom to babysit, but freaks out when stepmom says no to any of her children. Margaret insists that this is toxic and abusive parenting. Stepmom can't have children, and Margaret has told her that she's thankful for this because it was God doing the world a favor. She's told stepmom that she was the reason her cousin killed herself. She refuses to acknowledge her as a matriarchal figure and regularly says things like, "This is my dad's house, not yours. I'm not your daughter. You'd never be fit to be a mum," and "I don't know why my dad even married you." Margaret has gone as far as to compare stepmom to their dad's ex-wife, who stabbed him and ended up in prison. Stepmom has reached out multiple times to try and rectify and make peace with the situation, but Margaret escalates every time she does. All of this is so absurd for a woman of her age that I can't stand it. I've kept my mouth shut for years at this point out of respect for the family norms, even through all of this, but last week, I decided I'd had enough. Fern called me in tears to tell me that Margaret had ruined a dinner they went to that night. Again, Margaret has regularly used Fern as an emotional punching bag, and him calling me in tears is a regular occurrence at this point. At dinner, Margaret had called him fat and told him she didn't want her kids around him anymore because they would think being fat is okay. For context, Fern has struggled with an eating disorder for most of his life. On the phone call, Fern basically spilled his guts. There is a family vacation to Italy every few years, and apparently stepmom isn't going anymore because of Margaret. Fern also let me know that there's been talk of cutting Margaret out of the family for years, but their dad hasn't even started the conversation of this isn't okay yet, so none of them can say anything. Fern had tried to contact the husband, Corey, to see if there was something going on, but Corey refused to talk. I've always been friendly with Corey. He's a nice guy, and if you can get to him without Margaret in the room, he's actually really full of life and fun. So I called him myself. Corey told me that everyone is being so mean to Margaret, and she's trying to, quote, break generational cycles. It sounded like he had a script in front of him the whole time, and was almost word for word the same nonsense that Margaret says all the time. Margaret is a victim, everyone else is crazy, no one understands her, etc., etc. After listening to him for a while, I told him I cared about him, but that I was done with Margaret's BS. I blocked their numbers, their social media, and eliminated any other ways they had to contact me. This is a big no-no in this family. You don't confront it, you don't say anything, you just sit there and take it. I contacted Fern and stepmom and told them about my decision, and let them know that I wasn't going to show up to anything if Margaret was also going to be there. I told Tom and we had a whole conversation about it. Everyone is telling me they support me in my decision, but they have also said some variation of, I wish I could do that because I'm in the same boat. The subsequent backlash from all of this is that although I am maintaining relationships with the rest of the family, Margaret is even worse at functions now. I don't have to see it, but I hear about it all the time, and I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong decision. I didn't want to make it worse for anyone, but I just couldn't watch it happen anymore without escalating things myself. It really was getting to a point where I felt so stifled that I thought I might hit her out of frustration, which is why I chose to back out after all of this. The family still hasn't said anything to her, and my husband told me that they all have a role to play, but that I also kinda disrespected his dad by saying and doing this. Am I the jerk? No way. I mean, there's family customs, and then there's this, and this to me looks like just no one in this family is game enough to stand up for themselves. Why should anyone in this family tolerate all this abuse from Margaret? Over what? Waiting for the dad to say something about it? Please. I hope he answers some questions in the comments. Did you know how screwed up this family was before you married into it? I did know about it and had serious reservations for a while. The ultimate deciding factor is that outside of Margaret, all of them are truly incredible people that would give you the shirt off their backs without you even having to ask. They have a lot of strengths as individuals and even more as a unit, but for whatever reason, Margaret does not seem to see this the same way I do. I married into the family being relatively certain that I could deal with a family of doormats over a family of Margarets. There's always one, you know. Has your husband and his family spent time with your family? My husband has spent considerable time with my family, but they live overseas in Australia, so it hasn't been financially feasible for most of his side of the family to come hang out for extended periods of time. Our dads have met on multiple occasions, but nothing long-term outside of the wedding. What will happen when you and Tom have kids? We do not have kids and neither does Fern, only Margaret does. She threatens to keep them from the family all the time. I shut that crap down for myself months ago. I told her, you don't bring them around me anyway. She didn't speak to me for almost 3 months because it straight up just didn't work on me. And the family has put up with this for too long. To my knowledge, it started happening around the same time stepmom arrived in the picture. Margaret already has 2 kids at that time, but the other 2 are still young, 4 and 7. I wasn't there though, so I can only go based off of word of mouth. Okay, straight to an update, 2 days later. Wow, this blew up. I did not expect that. Before I give the most recent update, there are a ton of questions you guys had. I tried to answer you all individually, but here is more context. Tom is the only one in the dynamic that is low contact with Margaret. This happened very shortly after I entered the picture, when I put my foot down over an incident that was absolutely ridiculous. Margaret had accused him of trying to kill their youngest after we lent her a carpet cleaner that smelled. I burned sage regularly. She was dead serious about it and did not let up, and was like, wow, good to know you have no regard for human life. He broke down in tears for almost a week before I had to sit him down and tell him, this is the most insane take ever. How the F is Sage going to kill a kid? You realize how nuts that is, right? Don't let her steamroll you like this. He went low contact pretty immediately after that. Fern is a really soft-hearted person. It's been confirmed to me that growing up, Fern got it the worst from their biological mum. It's made him extra susceptible to Margaret's manipulations and guilt trips. They were really close when they were kids, and Fern sometimes feels that without Margaret, his life will be empty. It causes him a lot of distress in both directions. Losing Margaret is a devastating thought to him. Staying around her causes him a lot of pain and generally puts him in a really dark place. He's struggling with it. We still talk regularly and have a very close friendship. Corey is a really soft-spoken guy, super funny, friendly, and nice generally speaking. He only shifts gears when Margaret is present. The rest of the family has identified this as fear. I only cut him off because of the way Margaret uses him to gather information and spread drama. He deserves better, but I think we can all understand how scary it must be for him to even think about standing up for himself, considering that Margaret regularly threatens to take the kids away from someone over something as small as not pouring her a glass of water once, roughly twice a month. Margaret has yet to actually follow through with this, and genuinely only uses it as a form of control because of how effective it has been. It's like her Hail Mary pass. Mother-in-law really is a wonderful lady. She is really patient and understands how important father-in-law's kids are to him. She is trying her damnedest to not break up a family, and I think she genuinely wishes she could also stay out of it. Margaret has fully aimed everything at her at the moment, and it's put mother-in-law in a really uncomfortable position. She's a pretty tough lady. I think she's just as bewildered as the rest of us, and doesn't know what the hell to do with this situation because of how absolutely extreme it is. Father-in-law is getting a lot of hate in the comments. While I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the statement that he lacks a spine and is allowing it to happen, I also see the pain that this is causing him. While emotions aren't the easiest thing for him, I have to consider how absolutely triggering this whole thing is. I mean, the last time he was around this kind of person, she attempted to kill him. I know him to be an incredibly brave man, even if he doesn't always outwardly express his feelings or his opinions. It's got to be hard to juggle and wrap his head around this. He loves his wife, he loves his daughter. I agree that he should put an end to it, and that it's been a long time coming, but I absolutely understand why it would be a huge hurdle for him to confront, both in real time and within himself. I tell him all the time that he's a good dad, because he is. He really is. I think in the face of a super domineering woman, after all he and the kids have been through, just really puts him in an emotional pickle. I can absolutely understand that. Biological mum is a huge piece of crap. The family really doesn't talk about it much. With what they have told me, I don't blame them. Bio mum frequently told the kids that she hated them and wished that they were never born. She used them as ammo to get her way with other relatives. She regularly made life a competition between herself and 3 daughters. There are 2 more that are not in the picture that I have never met, and at times was violent with them. Fern and Bio mum got into arguments on a regular basis. Fern attempted suicide several times really early in life because of how abusive the environment was. This was also the birth of his eating disorder issues because mum regularly called him an ugly, useless waste of space. Tom has told me that he tried his best to stay out of the way, but that even he wasn't safe from the chaos. Oh yeah, and she regularly attacked father-in-law and eventually went to prison for attempted murder. Tom cut contact pretty immediately after that, followed by Margaret and father-in-law. Fern was the only one who tried to still have a relationship. The entire family has been absolutely no contact with the biological mother and the other 2 daughters for over a decade. Now to the update. I spoke to Tom again last night about this whole thing. I mentioned that I posted on Reddit about this, but I told him I wasn't going to show him until things cooled down with the family. He was cool with that. I asked him a few clarifying questions because I'm still super confused about how any of this got to the point that it has. He told me that no one is necessarily waiting on Dad to say something, but that everyone knows that he is the head of the family, so the no contact thing wouldn't work unless father-in-law decided to do it as well. Pretty much either they all have to do it, or none of them can without seriously compromising the relationships that do remain. Margaret lords the kids over everyone. Apparently this is the biggest barrier for the family. Tom says he is virtually indifferent at this point because he only sees the kids at family functions. But for Fern, father-in-law and mother-in-law, it's a lot different. Margaret is the only one of the siblings that has children, and she has regularly turned to the 3 of them for babysitting and financial support. They are all super attached to the kids and are really struggling with finding the lesser of 2 evils. I told them that I could understand that, but that I was still confused as to why everyone was okay with the automatic response to any barrier or boundary is, you won't see the kids again. It's not simple for anyone except me, I guess. I'll admit, I'm very F them kids in any situation like this. Children are not currency, in my opinion. So whenever anyone has pulled this on me, I have not hesitated to be like, okay, bye. Tom let me know that he still has plans to talk to his father about this, but that he ultimately feels that he cannot control any of it, so he's doing his best to compromise. He doesn't like Margaret at all. He pretty much wants nothing to do with her or her kids at this point. He also doesn't want to abandon his family over this because he feels like Margaret wins in that situation. He is playing the fence, to be fair, but I can't expect more than that from him. I get it. I also talked to mother-in-law yesterday. She's pretty confused because she comes from a family that confronts things head-on too. She's tried to talk to Margaret to squash things, but it goes more and more south when she does. I think this puts her between a rock and a hard place. She personally thinks that the only thing she did to offend Margaret is marry father-in-law. I've got to be honest, I agree, because mother-in-law is so generous with her money, love, support and attention that I find it very hard to believe that even a fraction of what Margaret is feeling is valid. Mother-in-law is a cool lady, and I've come to regard her as a very good person. Her current stance is, no one is going to get through to her, I'm not going to give my husband ultimatums, that's his daughter, it's his choice what he wants to do. For now, I am distancing myself, which is why I'm choosing to not go to Italy with them. Myself, Fern and Tom are going over to mother-in-law and father-in-law's house this Sunday. They were out of town on Mother's Day, so we rescheduled. Originally, Margaret and Corey were part of a group gift that I had fully planned and mapped out to give to Mum. However, very early in the process, they started pulling some likely shady crap, and I realized that this gift was going to be used to further manipulate the process. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. They have been completely cut out of the plan and are not welcome on Sunday. I feel bad that this means Corey also gets excluded. We all adore him, and the only thing he's done wrong is not challenge his wife on, but due to their proximity and the way Margaret uses him, he also had to be cut out of it. They have not contributed to the gifts because I purposely barred them from doing so. One of them is a very large collage with images of all the children. Margaret and Corey are nowhere on this collage on purpose. I also doubled down as hard as I could, incorporating several other gifts with the kids' names, likenesses, etc., without including Margaret at all. You don't get to treat someone like absolute crap, and then use my thoughtful idea to twist crap and use it against someone in the future. Sorry, if you wanted to be in on it so badly, you should grow the hell up. Maybe it's overkill, maybe it's mean. All I know is I've had enough, and I'm in full support of mother-in-law. Also in full support of F around and find out, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, talk crap, get hit, and don't bite the hand that feeds you. Mother-in-law also let me know that she sent Margaret a letter in the mail. This is how bad the situation has gotten. Mother-in-law continues to try to rectify the situation, but Margaret blocks her at every turn in favour of being mean over crap that really doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of things. I'm pretty sure this double whammy of the gifts and letter will stir up an obscene amount of crap in the very near future. All that anyone would really need is an apology that takes full accountability without pointing fingers, making excuses, or playing the victim. That in itself would be a huge step for Margaret and a sign that she is open to growth. It hasn't happened yet. I doubt it ever will. I'll give more updates as it all unfolds. I anticipate this being a long process. Some more comments and answers. Margaret is too reliant on her family to follow through with taking the kids away. I genuinely have brought this up a lot to them. It wouldn't make sense for her to cut off her primary babysitters, financiers, and punching bags. She would lose her apartment and her stay-at-home mother role, and have to work like the rest of us. They would revoke the car, and she would have no way to get around. She would be even less financially stable on top of that because she now needs to find childcare and a way to transport her older kids to and from school. I have stressed these points until I was blue in the face. She's not going to cut anyone off. It is in Margaret's best interest to keep towing everyone along. She does nothing but benefit from the chaos she manufactures and causes. This has fallen on deaf ears, or when it is received, it's not received well. I understand that it might be a cold thing to say to them, but it's the honest truth and reality of the situation. Denial is a river in Egypt. Will the family consider therapy? I'm in therapy, as is Tom. Fern is on and off, and supposedly Margaret is in therapy for herself. a couples therapist for her and Corey, and has a life coach. Not sure what to do with that info. Someone should tell Margaret she's acting like her mother. This is the ultimate kicker. Fern, Tom, and father-in-law all talk about how Margaret is essentially their biological mum all over again, and how she triggers the crap out of everyone when she's around. I have my own checkered background in this regard, and have to admit that even I get triggered by her antics sometimes. Corey knows that this is a topic of conversation and that it happens often. On our last phone call, I brought it up again. Corey's response was, "Margaret gets triggered by everyone saying she's triggering them." That sounds like a wildly convenient way to avoid all accountability. I translated it as, "I'm doing really mean things and making my family feel isolated, scared, and hurt, but I'm still the victim because I can't believe they feel that way, so it's actually their fault." I've brought this up to the family since they all frickin' talk about it all the time. Nothing, nada, zilch. It's been years of talk of, we should really do something. Never mind, let's stay out of it. This is really out of control. She's going to do what she wants, so why bother, etc., etc. The roller coaster has given me the strangest form of whiplash, I swear. What's the story on the other sisters? The remaining family cut them off. I don't have all the details, but I know it was first one, and then a few years later the other. All I know is that they were too much like their mum for anyone to handle. The shoe frickin' fits. There's been some alluding to drug use and theft, but I haven't heard the whole story or had concrete information told to me. They really don't like to talk about it. God, exhausting, and the cycle continues, right? I want to know what sort of life coach this Margaret lady is seeing, so I know not to go to that particular person. Honestly, the results of the work are pretty grim. Opie updates again, 4 days later. So, as you'll know, myself, Fern, and Tom had planned some Mother's Day gifts for mother-in-law. I gotta admit, I was worried that Margaret would show up and ruin the whole thing, but it was actually a surprisingly good day, mostly because she wasn't there, which was the obvious elephant in the room the whole time. Tom worked the grill for a while, and we had mother-in-law open the gifts I'd planned. It was a small pirate chest filled with letters from myself, Fern, and Tom, telling her how wonderful of a mother she was. I had aged them and weathered them to look waterlogged and like they'd been around for a long time. I made her a boondoggle that said, "Number 1 Mum," that had our names dangling from it. She opened the collage. The whole thing left her in happy tears, which was nice but also sad at the same time. She said, "Opie, you're such a crap for making me cry," then gave me a big hug. Mother-in-law started to talk about it all. It's been really rough and I've been having a really hard time, but it was cut off by the men fussing over the grill. I made the rest of lunch and we had a really, really good time for the most part. I clocked father-in-law's behaviour in Margaret's absence. He wandered off into the yard and stood by himself for extended periods of time, staring at the ground in silence. I registered it as pain. I'm not going to lie, it was palpable how much easier and fun and quiet the afternoon was with Margaret being intentionally excluded. I could tell that mother-in-law really needed to talk about what was going on, especially since she was being absolutely flooded with love, in stark contrast to what she's been receiving from Margaret. I approached her towards the end of the evening. She revealed to me what she'd put in the letter. Essentially, it reads something like this. "Dear Margaret, I am sorry that we're having such a hard time seeing eye to eye. I have had my conflicts with Fern and Tom in the past that we've been able to resolve. Since you do not wish to speak to me directly, I am hoping that we can communicate this way to see each other more clearly. I think you are upset with me because I married your dad, but I'm not sure because you'll not tell me what is wrong. I want to make peace with you, but I cannot do that with you so blatantly disrespecting me. I feel like I deserve an apology. I feel used by you, especially since I signed your lease for you when you asked right before this happened. Please write me back so we can resolve this. I love you." Apparently, mother-in-law had father-in-law read it before she sent it. This looks like a last-ditch effort to rectify the tension, but I'm not sure what the outcome would be, because we all know that Margaret is going to freak the F out the second she reads it. Margaret can't handle any blame, and has no sense of accountability. We can all see it coming, so definitely expect an update on that. On the ride home, I absolutely fell apart. It made me so sad that she has to go to these lengths to remedy a situation that she didn't cause in the first place. I was also very, very angry at father-in-law and basically the whole family for letting this go on for as long as it has. I ended up confronting Tom about this again. I told him that there are 600 strangers on Reddit calling him and his whole family spineless, and that I've found myself defending them because I know otherwise, but that in this situation, those 600 strangers are absolutely right. I said that I know his dad is human, but they're all a bunch of cowards for the fend for yourself, just let it go attitude they have when it comes to each of them being so wildly abused and disrespected as a family. Fern deserves better than to have a sister that has told me that the reason Fern got assaulted as a kid is because he put himself out there like that. Excuse me? Corey deserves better than a wife who threatens to call the cops on him for not making her dinner, huh? Tom deserves a better sister than one who has called me to tell me he's a creep and I bet he's done things to little girls before. No idea where that came from. Mother-in-law deserves better than someone who asks her for money and favors only to turn around and rip her to shreds. The entitlement. And father-in-law deserves better than to have such little self-esteem that he'd rather watch his family disintegrate rather than cut out the cancer. Yeah, I was heated. Margaret makes crap up, takes things out of context, and regularly demonstrates that she genuinely feels the world is out to get her and that everyone else is the problem. I did not let up. Tom listened very patiently. We exchanged a lot of words, and the conversation took over an hour, the end result being, "My dad is nearing approachable about this subject. Today showed him the kind of life we can have without her. You definitely launched a psychological bomb at him with how well you planned the day and how much you showed mother-in-law that she's worth something. He's struggling, but I promise that I'll talk to him about it soon. We talk 3 times a week. He knows it's coming." The last statement I made was, "I'm not an on-the-fence person. I'm the only one who is outright picked a side, and it's not Margaret's because I refuse to enable this insanity anymore. It's wrong, and you guys are wrong for coddling a grown woman's hurt ego, knowing that it's harming literally everybody else in the family. Pick a side and be done with it. I refuse to let mother-in-law go this alone." We will see how much longer this circus goes. I anticipate the events that happened this weekend leading to the biggest blow-up that Margaret has had yet. The shady online posts have already started, per Tom, who has found it amusing and low of her. It's about to get a lot crazier when this letter hits, and even worse when she eventually visits father-in-law and sees a giant collage with all the kids, except for her. There's so many of you that have said that you're emotionally invested in my story. I'll continue to update so we all get closure we need. Thanks for all the support. And trash talking. I've gotten quite a few lols out of the comments. Stay tuned, I guess. Whoa, yeah, this is really heating up, isn't it? And as far as symbolic nukes go, that letter is going to be huge. I really don't see Margaret changing, do you? Let's find out. Update, 22 days later. It's been a while, and I know that so many of you have been waiting on updates for the situation. There finally is something to report to you hungry Reddit readers. Heads up, there's been no resolution yet, but I can feel it coming fast and soon, hopefully. Last we left off was the Mother's Day incident. Since then, there's been a relative amount of dead air between everyone. Margaret is still posting bullcrap on the internet, Fern is still turtling the situation, Tom has been pretty quiet, and father-in-law is still avoiding movement on the whole thing. However, mother-in-law has finally put her foot down. Recently, there was some sort of impromptu excursion that mother-in-law and father-in-law went on to visit some old family friends in another state. Father-in-law grew up with them, I guess, and they haven't seen each other in a while, so he took mother-in-law out there to visit. Mother-in-law and father-in-law got a hotel while they were staying there. Apparently, about halfway through the trip, Margaret and Corey showed up. I'm not sure who initiated it, but the visits were stacked intentionally by one party or the other. There was about 2 days of overlap, with the in-laws arriving first, then Margaret, Corey and the 4 kids afterwards. Both parties were aware of the other. I have strong suspicions that this is why mother and father-in-law chose to stay at a hotel instead of with the friend in the first place. Anyway, things were wonderful when just the in-laws were there, but once Margaret's tribe showed up, it went on a spiral pretty quickly. Mother-in-law was telling me that it immediately started with the passive-aggressive comments. Nothing new there for anyone, so she just ignored it mostly. Mother-in-law made it a point to treat Margaret, Corey and the kids like she was meeting them for the first time, polite, respectful and reserved. The response to this was Margaret intentionally, deliberately, and obviously interfering any time one of her kids approached mother-in-law. Mother-in-law was unable to get a hug, a word of conversation, or virtually any time with the kids because Margaret kept redirecting them to other people. Pretty scummy, but it didn't stop there. There was some sort of dinner planned on the second overlap day. Mother-in-law and father-in-law had gone out to explore the state that morning, and mother-in-law decided to stay behind at the hotel afterwards to catch a quick nap. Father-in-law went to the friend's house without her. Margaret and Corey were at the family friend's house when this was happening, and I guess mother-in-law taking a nap was a big-ass problem for Margaret. Margaret was starving and hadn't eaten all day, and apparently this was mother-in-law's fault. Mother-in-law always does this. She has no respect. It went on from there, and she quickly started trying to campaign with the family friend, absolutely dragging mother-in-law through the mud and talking about how she always has to have her way. Apparently the family friend did not take kindly to this and nipped it pretty quickly, which entirely soured the mood for dinner by the time mother-in-law arrived. There was a lot of tension and more passive-aggressive comments over the evening. Mother-in-law wasn't aware of anything but the weird vibes over dinner, and father-in-law finally told her the entire story of Margaret's antics on the way back to the hotel room. So, now that everyone is caught up, the most recent development happened when the whole family got together yesterday, sans Margaret and Corey, who are still out of state. Mother-in-law and I were able to catch up, and I got the whole story. Apparently this overlap in the trip was going to be the determining factor for mother-in-law. If things were civil and respectful, she would go to Italy with the family. If not, she was going to stay behind. Well, not only is she staying behind, but she has finally had enough of Margaret all around. Mother-in-law was not angry or aggressive about it, but she gave father-in-law no room for conversation once she made the decision she made. Mother-in-law is definitely not going to pay for Margaret's car anymore. Mother-in-law also refuses to be a co-signer on Margaret's lease again. I guess it's coming up soon. The timeline is fuzzy on that one for me. And the big whammy, mother-in-law does not want Margaret, Corey, or the kids at the house anymore, period. She no longer cares that this means she won't be babysitting the kids anymore. In mother-in-law's words, she knows I can't have kids and she brings it up all the time, so it should come as no surprise to her that I have no problem not seeing them, because I won't know what I'm missing. I don't have kids, remember? She's thankful for that, remember? So take them. It doesn't mean anything to me anymore because it's not like she lets me really see them anyway. I'm not sure how this impacts father-in-law, but neither of us really care at this point. Solidarity within the Margaret sucks, we've had enough camp. During the conversation, I made it a point to tell her that I was proud of her. Mother-in-law has really been caught in the crosshairs for a long time, and it was awesome to hear that she's stopped waiting for father-in-law to make decisions about this. She told me quite plainly, I've decided that I don't like Margaret. She's just a mean person. And maybe it's cold, but she can take the kids with her at this point. I'll survive without them. It hurts, but it's not like I'm going to die if she suddenly disappears from my life. Hell yeah, go mother-in-law. I told her that Tom also can't stand her, and that's why we arrive and leave early from family functions. He doesn't want to be around her at all if he can help it. That made her smile. I'm not sure how relevant this is, but it was something I noticed over the course of the conversation between myself and mother-in-law. Fern has been firmly, I'm staying out of it these days. However, he milled around the conversation long enough for me to suspect he was listening in. He stood near us, not saying anything, and busying himself with a 5-minute task that apparently turned into a 20-minute task. I'm not sure what this is about. I don't think he's reporting to Margaret or anything. He wouldn't ruin his own day like that. I think he genuinely wanted to know what was going on, but just really didn't participate in the convo. I'm seriously hoping that Fern is the next to put a foot down with Margaret. At that point, the only person left on the fence would be father-in-law. Fern still calls me about Margaret sometimes, but he's much more elusive and sheepish than he used to be. It's almost like he's unsure of what to do, other than just let it play out. As much as Fern loves Margaret, he's about at the end of his rope as well, and I think ultimately he's just wrestling with his feelings right now. Anyway, mother-in-law and I made plans to hang out while the family is in Italy. We have a spa day plan, a trip to a tea house, horseback riding, all kinds of cool stuff. We also laughed about how the whole family is going to spend an entire week in Italy trapped with Margaret, while we get to have a vacation fully away from all the drama. It made me happy to see that mother-in-law did not give in to the pressure that she was under to go for the sake of her husband. It really did. Also, to see the excitement on her face while we were planning our week. God, what a priceless, wonderful moment to savor. She drew her line, and I couldn't be prouder. The rest of the family, however, is still a go for Italy. This was honestly infuriating to me. How many more chances does this person get? I'd previously stated that I believe father-in-law to be a good father, and he is, but he's also a huge coward. I talked to Tom about this yesterday again. My poor husband gets an earful about this every time we come home from a family event. I still genuinely do not understand why he would choose to continue to allow a bomb in his house with the justification that he doesn't know how to defuse it. Homie, just throw the bomb out of your house. WTF. Everyone is getting hit with shrapnel, and it's nuts. I again iterated to Tom that I don't understand why the problem is still allowed to go on this amazing vacation despite being an entitled, malicious brat, but mother-in-law and I have to stay home because we have no desire to deal with her nonsense. Italy is amazing and we always have a good time. Fern and Tom have both told me separately that their plans are to go do something else away from her when she starts acting up. I can't imagine how that is supposed to be relaxing. I'm not going to spend a crap ton of money to go on a vacation just to sign up for it being ruined, or to have to adjust my plans around someone who can't chill out for more than 30 seconds at a time. We had a long conversation where I, again, brought up that it would be in Margaret's best interest to stop her bullcrap if there was serious threat to her current lifestyle. Tom told me that it's unlikely that anything the family says or does would change her behaviour or make her come to reality. I guess they've been here before with Margaret in their younger years. Tom told me this whole story about how Margaret was confronted with something, not sure what, by the family and was told to shape up or ship out. She left home, shacked up with a bunch of random people for a place to live, and bounced around couches for a while and refused to come home. I guess all she had to do in that instance was apologise, but she was so hell-bent on the idea that everyone was out to get her that she chose virtual homelessness instead. Tom told me that Corey was the one who got Margaret off of random couches. This whole story threw me for a whirlwind. Tom said, "You don't know Margaret. She will put herself on death's doorstep before she admits that she's wrong or that she screwed up. It's easier for her to play the victim, spin some bullcrap, and lay down the sympathy card than it is for her to deflate her ego." My response to that was, "Tell me again why she's still invited to Italy?" The conversation went virtually nowhere after that. Basically the same thing all over again. Dad has to do it, it's a tough situation, you don't understand because you aren't family, I'm just going to do my own thing, blah blah blah. The situation is maddening still. However, I have a feeling that Margaret is going to pop off during the vacation. Without me or mother-in-law there, she can do her passive-aggressive crap-talking thing pretty freely. I'm sure that it's going to be very, very hard for the rest of the family to ignore it for a week straight without reprieve. I told Tom that if he had any sense, he would use it as an opportunity to push his father's feet to finally move. Although I have faith in my husband doing the right and brave thing, I also know that the dynamic is working against him in this case. We'll see what happens. The vacation is set to take place in a little under 2 months. I'm not sure if I'll have another update for you guys until then, but if I do, you can definitely expect it to be on here. Tom promised to keep me updated while in Italy, so mother-in-law and I know what to expect when everyone gets back. I really do have a feeling that this Italy trip is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back if it goes sour, despite all the posturing. I'm certain that everyone going knows that when it comes to Margaret, it's an inevitability that chaos will ensue, especially because Margaret, her 4 kids, Corey and Fern, all are staying in a cheap hotel, while the rest of the entire family rented a townhouse for the week. It's going to be funny sitting on the sidelines with mother-in-law away from all of that. However, I know that the group is going to come back absolutely depleted. Fingers crossed that Italy is the thing that finally causes everyone to actually put an end to this crap show. One comment asks, have Margaret and the bio mother been evaluated for mental illness? Opie says, Tom has told me that he thinks the bio mum might have struggled with bipolar disorder, but that is unconfirmed. To my knowledge, Margaret is currently without any formally diagnosed mental illnesses. And Opie, why aren't you giving your husband pushback for planning to go on this vacation? Oh, trust me, I put Tom on the spot all the time for this. If you dislike her so much, why continue to associate? The kids, my dad, it's difficult. Like, dude, no it's not. You see the kids at family functions, that's it. Your dad is dragging us. Why are we supporting idle behavior in the face of this? The whole bunch seems in freeze mode. It's frustrating, but the only thing I can do is what I have been doing. Okie dokie, folks, and we've finally reached the final update, 6 months later. It's really hard for me to believe that 6 months went by since this fiasco. I'm so sorry for making you all wait for so long. There has been a lot going on, as you will soon see, and I've not had time to update anyone on this. I also thought it would be a good idea for things to settle down first. A lot of you might be disappointed, but here's what happened. Italy did not go smoothly for almost anyone. Who saw that one coming? Don't get me wrong, they had a fun time, but the ever-constant chaos that seems to follow the family everywhere was right along with them. Shortest version possible, per Fern, who is the only one I'm still in contact with. Margaret, Corey and Fern all shared a hotel room, away from the rest of the family. Fern was having a bit of a hard time being around Margaret, who raged basically the whole time, so he offered to switch spots with a family friend that went with them. Margaret turned this into a "whose side are you on" kind of scenario, and spent the rest of the trip talking crap and doing the histrionic thing that she likes to do. Her tribe alternated between engaging with the family in short bursts and retreating into their own little hole whenever things didn't go Margaret's way. Surprisingly, this was the least stressful thing that happened to the family. As it turns out, it was actually Tom who ruined it for everyone. As Fern tells it, he was crap-housed almost the whole time and started arguments with almost everyone, including Fern himself, who Tom brought to tears. Father-in-law had to intervene on multiple occasions because Tom was getting very out of hand and basically causing problems for damn near the whole family. Everything from kicking over trash cans in the street, to verbally attacking Fern, to antagonizing things with Margaret, to walking off by himself and screaming at nothing. A lot of "I ruin everything I touch" and "get the F away from me" type of things. Apparently he also had a full mental breakdown over me separating from him, but he continued to aggressively take it out on virtually everyone that was out there in Italy with him. At the tail end of the trip, he fully cried and broke down and spoke to Fern and told him everything that was happening at home. And apparently no, we did not miss an update. This is the first time the separation was mentioned. Right before they all left, I spent a brief period of time with mother-in-law. We got brunch and talked for a lot of hours. It was pleasant, but that conversation helped me firmly make up my mind. I knew it was time to consider separating from my husband, and that it might be the last time I was going to see her. We cried about it, and the more we both talked, the more it seemed like staying was a bad idea for me. She fully supported my decision, and promised to keep in touch. Originally, the decision was around a trial separation. I had enough of the whole thing, and just needed my space away from the circus for a while, but I still loved him, so divorce was not yet firmly on the table. I realized that this is the dynamic that I'll potentially be raising my own children in. The dysfunction was insanity, and looking back on it, I would be lying to myself if I said that Tom and Margaret were totally different people. Tom himself would rage out over seemingly minute things, or shut down and sulk when things don't go his way too. The lack of communication, the outbursts, the complete crap show was getting to me. I know that the family has a lot of trauma, as a unit, clearly, but at the end of the day, I have my own peace to prioritize, so I felt that moving out would be a solid solution. Tom and I had talked about this shortly before everyone left for Italy. We were firmly on the same page about it, and everything seemed amicable. The agreement was for us to both enjoy our time apart, then to come together after Italy to really work on our marriage. To my knowledge at this time, everything in Italy was going smoothly. Tom gave no indication whatsoever that he was struggling, or that there was chaos in the area. I assumed, of course, because of Margaret, but to be completely frank, there was no sign over the phone that there was anything wrong. We did not talk about the separation, so I was under the impression that we were still on the same page. So while Tom was raging in Italy, I packed my stuff and moved to my own place, exactly as we had discussed. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a wrong move in Tom's book. The whole thing went to hell pretty much the second he got back to the house. The way he behaved, it was like looking Margaret in the face, but times 10. So angry, so irrational, so intensely cruel and seeping with hatred. It didn't go according to plan for him, and I think he genuinely didn't take me seriously when I said I needed a break. As it turns out, I was serious as a heart attack, and he really, really didn't like that. During this time is when Fern told me everything that happened. He gave me a blow-by-blow of the entire Italy trip, including his last conversation with Tom. 100% of the information I have has come directly from Fern, who is by a landslide the sanest of the blood relatives. Naturally, during the fiasco of me leaving, I confronted Tom about this, specifically the last conversation they had. I asked him why he was being so hostile when this was a discussed agreement that we came to an amicable decision on. I pointedly asked him how he can come home and behave this way towards me when he was upset with me leaving in the first place. In my mind, it would have made more sense to actually communicate our feelings instead of, quite frankly, raging out and being a dickhead. Tom was very defensive and essentially cussed me out. "You don't know anything. Oh, because you were there, right? Get out of my face. Call the cops if you're so pressed about it." It was quite nasty, actually. I won't say it wasn't predictable, but I certainly didn't see it going as far as it went, so I made the next decision, which is what half of you on Reddit proposed to me on the very first post about this situation way back when. After Tom made it clear that he viewed me as an enemy for standing up for myself, I knew divorce was the best option. I've not seen him nor been in contact with him since July, which is the last day I had any possessions in the house. I've since gotten the hell out of there, and I'm currently on no contact with the entire family, with the exception of Fern, who I will always love and adore. I'm flying back home to Australia this week to see some relatives over the holidays, and I couldn't be happier with my decision to leave my soon-to-be ex-husband behind. My life has been so quiet since I left. I'll admit, sometimes I do miss the drama. It could be entertaining at times, but mostly I'm just glad that I don't have to conform to someone else's whack idea that filtering your boundaries or being a doormat is the best option for conflict solving and resolution. To my knowledge, no one has talked to Margaret about her behaviour, and Tom has continued to behave the same way he did in Italy. Makes sense, and I'm thankful for all the advice I received on here. Rereading the comments, I laugh a lot more at them. You guys saw things that I couldn't, and I think if I hadn't come on here, I would still be in a chaotic marriage and living in a circus tent. I wish that family the best, but unless they all collectively start going to intensive therapy, I doubt it will ever change. Nuts, crazy, insane. No thank you. Stay blessed, but do it way the hell over there, away from me. Thank you all for being so patient. Maybe I was the jerk for calling out the nonsense in real time, but I certainly am not the jerk for leaving before my hair fell out. Much love to you all, hungry Reddit readers. Wow, what an epic story, and we've finally reached the end of it. And ultimately, probably the best ending for OP in this case. I mean, it was taking years off my life just reading about this family. I can't imagine being around them. You can't help but feel like OP was a little bit in denial about the behaviour of the family in the beginning, which is understandable because, you've married someone and you've made a commitment to them. The last thing you want is for that person that you've committed to have problems like this. But with their upbringing and the way they were handling conflict, you could just see it from a mile away. Anyway guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that story down below. Thanks for making it to the end, and I'll see you all in the next video. Happy holidays. Bye.